I hope you bear with me. If things get difficult, Srilan Prabhu at the back, you just wave to me. A very warm welcome to all of you. When I came into the lecture theatre, I was really surprised to see so many of you here and so early. Traditionally in our programs, most of the crowd tend to come in after the lecture for obvious reasons. The most important, of course, is that the group of devotees and well-wishers who come in, he always speaks just before we serve prasadam, which is also for obvious reasons. So today I've been told to speak for 1 hour. Now it's very difficult for me to speak this topic in 1 hour, but Brajai Prabhu, is the person calling the shots. So I think I should be more disciplined and keep it to 1 hour, because anything more than that, and I think I will lose you. So my only request today is, first, bear with me. If you have questions, if you have any queries, I'd be happy to speak with you just after we have gone through the lecture. This is a very important format for us every year. Some of you have joined us. Who's come for the first time? Oh, this is amazing. This is very nice. Almost half of you have come for the first time. So I really want to take the opportunity to welcome all of you. That doesn't mean I'm not welcoming everyone else who has come before. Right? So if you've come for the first time, it will be a good opportunity to see what we do in NUS every year and what we do in NUS every week, because we have such regular gatherings, discussions on the Gita, and the whole point of these discussions is to keep them practical, which is why today's topic is actually yoga, which is application in daily life, which means yoga should be practical. The whole point of our movement, whenever we speak about religion, whenever we speak of a way of life, when we speak of philosophy, the biggest problem we have is it's easy for us to speak about it. But it's another thing when you leave this place and try and practice it. So today what we want to do for the next hour is try and explore this concept of yoga. Quick show of hands. How many of you actually are practicing yoga? Tentative hands are going up. Okay, fine. When I say yoga, let me start first. How many of you are practicing some form of hatha yoga, which involves breathing exercises and some exercises of the body? Okay, that's fine. How many of you are doing more meditative yoga? Okay, fine. That's good. Now, whenever I lecture on the topic of yoga to even non-Indians around the world and even in Singapore, I still find a lot of hands going up because they also practice some form of yoga. And very often they do it as a matter of exercise. But you know and I know that in the Vedic faith, the idea of yoga is very broad. So today we want to look at 3 different kinds of yoga, and we can try and see how practical they are in our lives. The whole point of it is that eventually, by the end of today's session, we can go back, hopefully, with an idea of whether we can actually utilize what we have discovered today, or try and put it into practice, or come back for more. Now, the other thing I will also urge you is, there are children in our audience, naturally. Parents, you come with children, I can understand. And it is very natural that children being children, they will have to make some form of, I won't say noise, but some form of conversations, either with themselves, which is very often possible, or with other fellow students of theirs about the same age. Our duty as parents and everyone else here is to please forgive them if they are speaking a bit. You know, you all have been parents or will be parents, so it is their nature to speak, but it should be our nature to override that and try and concentrate. That's also yoga, by the way, right? So that's a practical application of yoga. So that's what we should keep in mind. Now, one last question. How many of you are students in NUS? Okay. How many of you have some link with NUS? Okay? How many of you are teaching in NUS? Very nice. And is there anyone here who's not teaching in NUS and who is here today with us also? Okay? Thank you so much for joining us. And I want to take the opportunity to thank Professor Lalit Goel. Yeah, he didn't put up his hand. He is the Dean in the admissions of NTU group. Yes. And if you were to Google his name, you'll find out that Professor Goel has won a record, what? 20 or 15? 20 times the award of the most popular or outstanding teacher in NTU. You know, he's well recognized in NTU, and there are so many scholars who are so impressed with him. But the amazing thing about Professor Goel is that he sits with us, and I've had so much fortune of dealing with him. He's so down to earth, and that's also a practical application of yoga. Okay? A brief background about myself before I start. Now, I studied in the NUS centuries ago, sometime in 1994. No, I'm sorry, my God, I've forgotten. 1992 to 1995, yes. I was in the law faculty. I understand the law faculty is no more in NUS, but I was in the law faculty for 4 years. I'm born and brought up in Singapore. My parents are born and brought up in Singapore. My grandparents are born and brought up in Singapore. So I've been in Singapore for a long, long time. But I have the good fortune of going to India once every 5 weeks. So which makes me very much in connection with the Vedic culture that is probably India's greatest treasure. So today's topic is actually the culture that we are speaking about. When we talk about application and theory, the best way to explain this is in a very simple illustration. There are 3 men who are standing beneath a mango tree. And they have been waiting for a few hours because the mango looks ripe enough and they think that the mango is going to drop. So naturally they are just waiting for the mango to drop. The reason why they stand there is because they want to taste the mango. So what happens is, while they wait, all of a sudden a crow comes, flies, settles itself on one of the branches where the mango is, and its weight causes the branch to just drop slightly. And when it drops slightly, a gust of wind comes at the same time. And the wind, the crow, and all of a sudden, the mango drops. Now the 3 men have been waiting for the mango to drop for some time. And now it has dropped. So what do? They reach out to get the mango because they want to eat it. Just before they eat it, the first man says, "My dear brothers, let me ask you a question. I'm curious. What do you think finally caused the mango to drop?" So the first man says, "I think it was the gust of wind. That was the thing that finally got the mango to drop." The second man says, "I disagree. I think the reason why the mango has dropped is because that crow sat on the branch and there was a bit of weight and that caused the mango to drop." The third man said, "I disagree with both of you. I think it's a combination of 2 factors. The fact that there was a crow and there was a gust of wind." And so the 3 men started discussing what could probably be the most likely reason why the mango had actually dropped. Now while they're very busy discussing it, you have this boy, like any of these children, and he walks by. He sees 3 men discussing very philosophically the reason why the mango has dropped. He sees the mango on the floor, and he sees the tree. So what does he do? He picks up the mango. The men are too busy discussing it, and he puts the mango into his mouth and he eats it. And the moment he tastes the mango, he says, "This is very nice." And he takes the mango away. Now the 3 men have finally decided that they have done enough of discussions, enough of theories, and they start looking on the ground for the mango. No mango. It's gone. This is the simplest way our scriptures explain to us about the difference between theory and application. Sometimes our tendency in life, especially when we come to a certain level of education, and I think that includes all of us here, including myself, we have a tendency to discuss many things. We have a tendency to theorize many things. But ultimately, we don't realize that until we test it, until we actually get into something, until we actually try and taste it, we will never really know how something actually works out. It's the same thing with marriage, isn't it? You know, for thousands of years, we've always had arranged marriages. And every time we ask our parents, how did you two get married? You don't know each other, you just sat down. My father said, I took one look at her, she looked all right, I got married to her. My mother said, I looked at him, I liked his moustache, and I thought he's fine. To our generation, that's really scary. If a moustache determines my husband, I don't know. And like that, sometimes we speculate and speculate and speculate, and by the time everything is over, our expiry date is also over. And then we look at everyone else who's married and we think, what happened to me? It's an illustration, but it gives you an idea that every day we are challenged with two things. One, do I just simply have theories in my head? Or two, do I take a plunge and do I try it? So for yoga, the main gist of it today is not just to discuss it in terms of theoretical perspective. We can all do that till the cows come home. We have enough intelligence in this room to do that. But the trick finally is that if you practice it, what happens? So this is what I want to share with all of you. Okay. Now, the first easiest way for us to start with is, what is the meaning of the word yoga? The word yoga actually in Sanskrit means to unite. It also means to yoke. You know, when you till the land and the hoe that touches the base of the soil, the point of touching in Sanskrit is considered to yoke. It is only when you do that to land, if you're familiar with farming, that's when you actually start fertilizing the soil. So the idea of yoga in Sanskrit is that it is a process, not a theory, in which you actually connect with a higher force. What we know as God, what we accept as the Supreme Lord. So in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says very nicely this point. He says in 15:7, he gives the reason why the idea of yoga is to connect something with something. In this case, Krishna says that actually all the living entities in this world are part and parcel of the complete whole, who is known as the Supreme Lord. So this is the starting point of yoga. It's very clear. Otherwise, there's no purpose to yoga. If you want to connect with something, then the idea of connection is generally known as yoga. But in the Gita, it becomes more specific. Because in the Gita, Krishna says, all the living entities in this world, they are eternal, which means our body may leave us. But the Vedic scriptures tell us that we have a soul, and the soul continues. And Krishna says here that not only are they eternal, but they are fragmented, which means they're very small. The easiest illustration is also given in the Bible and in all the scriptures of the world. The idea is that of a father and a son, or a parent and a child. A child is part and parcel of a parent. He or she cannot deny that. Sometimes children deny the fact that we have come from parents. And in a spirit of rebellion, we may move away. We may need to forge our own identity instead of being always in alignment with our parents. But eventually, as time goes on and as we mature, you find that as prodigal sons and daughters, we do come back to the realization that yes, we are all part and parcel of something bigger. So Krishna actually speaks about that in the Gita. And the only difference between us and the living entities is also given very, very simply. If you go today to East Coast Park, and East Coast Park technically is the South China Sea. So if you were to take a drop of water from the South China Sea, the Pacific Ocean, the Indian Ocean, if you take a drop of water, which is minute, if you analyze it, you find by and large the qualities of the entire ocean in terms of composition of water are actually found right in that one drop of water. But to say that this drop of water I hold is the Pacific Ocean is not entirely accurate. That is the closest and simplest way we can understand the fact that we may have come from Krishna, we may have come from our Supreme Father, but we are fragmented because we are small. And Krishna says, Because we live in this material world, we are always struggling with two things. One, the mind, and second, our senses. We all have 5 senses. Anyone else has a 6th sense, let me know. But 5 senses are generally the norm. And the mind is the master of the senses. Just look at all of us now. Every time someone walks in, walks out, our mind tells us, you know what, have a quick look. And that's what we do. And every time that happens, from here I notice that. Because my mind is saying, look at them looking at someone else. See, it happens with all of us. If I were to sit all of you down now and tell you, let's do an experiment. For the next 10 minutes, please think of everything else that you can except elephants. I guarantee you, in the 10-minute period, your mind, even as I'm speaking, I'm doing that right now. I'm thinking of elephants too. And that's how the mind is. So Krishna says, this mind, Arjuna, it is very powerful. And when the mind controls your senses, and there is nothing to control the mind, then you will have difficulties in this world. So 2 things we learn. 1, we have a connection to the Supreme Lord. But because we are small in nature, and we are struggling with our mind and senses, we are not always successful in getting that connection constant. That's the first thing to note. The second point is very important. If yoga is a form of connection, if it's a relationship, then the Vedic scriptures tell us that there are 3 different roads to unite and to connect with the Supreme Lord. And the names are all familiar to you. The first yoga is known as karma yoga. The second yoga is known as sometimes dhyana yoga, sometimes jnana yoga, sometimes ashtanga yoga, and sometimes in the subset you have hatha yoga. And the third is what we call bhakti yoga. And all these words are not unfamiliar to you. Karma yoga means basically that we connect with the Supreme Lord by working in His service, by working for Him. The idea of work as worship. This is very unique and very dynamic in the Gita. And that's why the world over, you go to so many multinational corporations today. Many of these human resources, they train personnel with principles coming from the Gita. Why? Because work becomes sacred. And it becomes a great incentive if you're running a company and you want your personnel to be motivated on a higher level. So that's work as worship. The second yoga is about meditation. It covers more the idea of mechanical breathing, a process by which you sit and you undergo, and ultimately you have a meditative form of the Lord which you try to capture in your heart. The third process is known as bhakti yoga. The word bhakti, I don't even have to elaborate. In English, bhakti, the closest you can come in English, bhakti is possibly the word devotion. But Sanskrit is such a complete language, and English is just the opposite of that. That sometimes you need a few words to just fill up one word in Sanskrit. So the best and closest way to actually describe bhakti is the way we've described it here. Loving, sincere, devotional service to the Supreme Lord. That is the root meaning of bhakti. Okay, so now we know there are 3 different ways to connect with God. So let's look at each way and see how practical they are, because that's the purpose of why we are here today. The first way is actually the idea of meditation. I'm going to take that first because it makes it easier for us to understand what actually meditation is in the beginning, so we can actually understand it better as we go along. Now, whenever you read Bhagavad Gita and all other scriptures, you'll find that the aim of yoga is still the same. All 3 yogas actually only have one primary aim, that is to connect. But to connect to the Supreme Lord, they all agree on one point. There must be a way to control the mind and control the senses. Until you have some form of control over your mind and senses, it is very difficult to become peaceful in this world. And I can tell you one thing. The aim of everybody in this room, the aim, if I were to ask you what is the purpose of your life today, I can confidently say that everyone here has the same meaning, has the same objective. We all have the same objective. Every one of us in this room, our purpose of life is ultimately to become happy. That is the key. In fact, our scriptures tell us that there are only two kinds of people who will not want to be happy. One is a madman. A madman will probably not want to be happy. He would rather be depressed. He's not so happy and he's not so well. The second is a dead man. A man who's not conscious will never want to be happy. He doesn't have the facility to do that. We may all have different ways of becoming happy or wanting to be happy. But we've all got married, we have children, we have careers, we have plans, our 3-year plans, our 5-year plans, our 10-year plans. But ultimately, at the end of every plan, every day, we want to be happy. That's what we want. So until we control our mind and senses, the scriptures tell us it's very difficult to sustain happiness. Yes, we've all felt happy at some point of our lives. But have you noticed something about happiness in this world? Every time you have a moment of happiness, there will come a moment of sadness. Whenever you climb a mountain all the way up and you feel very happy, you have to also realize that after climbing up and being ecstatic, you have to come down. And that's life. Most of the time, our joys are just like that. We are very happy, and next moment something happens. How many times have we sat for an exam, and at the end of the exam, when we put our pens down, we are ecstatic. I was ecstatic every time I finished that in law school. But after I finished it, I didn't care about the results, because at that point it didn't matter. We still had a few months anyway. So I was really happy when everything had finished. But a few weeks before the exam results come, how do you think we feel? Those of us who have worked hard and who are confident, at that point we may doubt. Those of us who have not worked hard and who know, oh, I'm going to crash, then that's the time we become very pious. That's the time our mothers suddenly see, why is he going to the temple so often? Why is he breaking coconuts right and left? Oh, by the way, I tell this to everyone. When I sat for my O-levels, right, I did well. And then my father told me the next day that I prayed that if you did well for your O-levels, you will have to break 100 coconuts. So I told him, I thought the system is whatever you pray for, you have to do. So you should break the 100 coconuts, because I didn't pray to break the 100 coconuts. But he said, no, this was a bit of a different deal. The deal was I prayed very hard, but you'll have to break the 100 coconuts. So we all go through the moments of ups and downs in our lives. Those who are married, they look at those who are not married and say, I wish. Those who are not married, pressure coming from the house, pressure coming from everyone. They look at those who are married and say, oh nice, husband and wife, they smile with each other. The husband and wife who smile, they think, yeah, we're smiling outside, but you don't know what's inside. And then the husband and wife who don't have children, they look at others who have children and say, when will that joyous day come? And those who have children and they are up and about and doing all the things they shouldn't do, they think, if only you knew. There's no end to this in the world, and it's going to continue. It happened to our forefathers, it happened to us, it happened to your children. Happiness in this world, to sustain it, is a challenge. So that's why yoga aims to control the mind and the senses. And in meditation, the idea is to control it by way of mechanical means. Now, this is an amazing picture, isn't it? This is what you may look like if you take up Dhyana Yoga. I'm not discouraging you, but this is a beautiful picture that comes in the Gita. Now, Krishna is the best authority to describe to us what Dhyana Yoga is. And if you read the verse, which I have put down there, you will see what is needed if you were to practice meditation in the way which has been recommended by the scriptures. Krishna says, if you want to practice this yoga, please find a secluded place. Then you go and find some kusha grass. You can get it at Jyoti's, I think. Then you cover it with deer skin. I'm not sure about that. And soft cloth, possible. The seat on which you're sitting should neither be too high or too low. I leave it to you. And it should be situated in a sacred place. Next, the yogi should sit on it very firmly, and he should practice yoga. This is the important thing. To purify the heart by controlling the mind and the senses. See, the point is, until our heart becomes clear and purified, we will not be able to totally connect with that which is considered to be supreme pure. So the aim of yoga is to purify our heart, our mind, our senses, and our activities. And how does the Dhyan Yogi do it? How does the Jnana Yogi do it? He does it by concentrating his mind on one point. On one point. And the second verse, Krishna says, you have to hold up your body, your neck, and your head very erect. You also have to stare steadily at the tip of your nose. Then, with an unagitated, subdued mind, devoid of all fear and completely free from a life of physical pleasures, please meditate upon me within the heart and make me the ultimate goal of life. So this is the standard in which, if you want to perform this form of yoga, this is the practice, and this is the way to actually do it. Now, when Arjuna hears this from Krishna, he says in 633 of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna, okay, you have told me now that this is the way in which I should meditate if I follow this path. And now he says, Madhusudana, that's another name of Krishna. This system of yoga that you have just explained to me is impractical and it is unendurable. Arjuna says that in the Gita. Now, that's a very strong statement to make to Krishna, especially when Krishna is speaking the scripture. And here you have Arjuna disagreeing with him. But Arjuna is speaking from his viewpoint, which is very important to us. He says that this yoga may appear and can be impractical, and it may not be something that I can endure for a long time. Why? He gives the answer. He says, because Krishna, this mind, is very restless and it's very unstable. In Bhagavad Gita, the nature of the mind is known as chanchal. Chanchal, you know the meaning of the word chanchal. A deer that moves around in a forest is described as chanchal. If you have someone walking with anklets, and you hear the sound, it goes like chanchal. So the mind is also described that way. So the main difficulty of this yoga is that the nature of the mind makes it very hard for you to sustain such a meditation. Which is why I ask all of you to sit still now. Don't move your hands, don't yawn, don't clap, don't do anything. It's going to be very difficult. After a while you'll decide, you know what, this program is not for me, I better leave. But if I were to tell all of you, get out of the LT now and go and have prasadam, you will all leave and you'll be very happy. Because when you have prasad, you're actually engaging some parts of your senses. Have you realized when you take prasadam, time can pass and you don't mind it? Do you realize that if I were to go more than 1 hour, you will start realizing it? This is too long. Do you realize that when your mind is engaged in a higher activity, a higher order of things, time passes without you being disturbed? So Krishna, Arjuna is saying the nature of the mind is that it is the seat of speculation and concoction. Because, he says, the mind is 1, restless. 2, it is turbulent. 3, it is very stubborn. Have you found that when you tell yourself, don't think about this, you start thinking? When you tell your mind, I don't want to speculate, your mind speculates. When you tell your mind something, its function is to tell you something else. That's the nature of the mind. You can't fight it. So Arjuna says the mind is very strong. It is very strong. And it is easier, Krishna, to control the mind, the wind, than it is to control the mind. Very powerful statement. Very powerful statement. When we use the word speculation, it's very important for you to understand what speculation is in terms of the scriptures. Shall I give you an example of speculation? Okay, myself and Bala, he's the organizer. We know him as Brajali. We're very close. We always talk to each other, we see each other. In NUS, we walk past each other, and every time we see each other, we say hello. It's a normal thing, you do that with people. One day what happens is Bala wakes up on the wrong side of the bed, so to speak. He's had a bad night, he's got a lot of work, he's got things on his mind. So in the morning, when he passes by me, the usual hi is absent. When I say, hello Bala, he ignores me, he walks away. He looks very upset. Now, I walk away. And I say, well, maybe he didn't see me, maybe today he had something on. I'm trying to convince myself it's nothing. But as I sit for a lecture, at the back of my mind, I may start thinking, why did he do that? Did I do something? Did I say something? Did I say something I didn't mean? Or did I do something? I don't know. So I start thinking. Now, then I decide that what's the point? If he wants to behave like that with me, I'm a sensitive soul. Some of us are more sensitive than others. And if someone doesn't smile at us, we decide, okay, fine, we don't smile back at them. That's okay. So now I decide I will not smile back at Bala tomorrow. I won't say hi to him, because maybe this is how he wants to regulate our relationship. Now Bala next day has had a good night. He slept very well. The assignments were all good. Everything was fine. So next day he's back to his chirpy self. Now he walks past me and I walk past him. He says hello and I look away. We've had these experiences, haven't we? And then at that point Bala starts thinking, now what did I do? And now at the back of his mind he starts thinking, he was alright with me the other day he was okay, nothing was wrong. Obviously he values my friendship, I do to him, and that's why we are now becoming so sensitive souls. So Bala decides, never mind, if he wants to be like this, next time I will respect the fact that he doesn't want to smile at me, I will not smile at him. Now I have walked away from this, and now I regret. I think this is a very childish thing to do to Bala. What should I do? I decide next time I will smile back at him, assuring him that everything is alright between us. So the next time we come back together and we smile, I start smiling at him, Bala decides to look that side. And in that way, nothing happened. He woke up on the wrong side of the bed. It had nothing to do with me. I took it personally, he takes it personally. And if we ever were to sit down and discuss it, we will realize that, the problem was very small, but the mind's nature is, it has a way of developing layers and layers and layers to make that problem look bad. I know of brothers and sisters. I do family law, I practice family law. I know of husbands and wives who have decided not to talk to each other for 20 years. Okay? And finally when I sit them down and I ask them, what is the reason why you have not spoken to each other? They look at each other and say, we're not very sure now. It's been a while, there was something, but now I'm not so sure. All I know now is I'm not supposed to talk to him. I don't want to talk to him. This is the nature of the mind. And with that kind of a mind, to perform the things that was told by Krishna before that, Arjuna says Krishna is very difficult. There are two examples of great personalities known as yogis in our scriptures who tried to control the mind, but they failed. One of them, the more famous one, is Vishwamitra. Vishwamitra is a great sage and he's a great personality from Ramayana. He is the person who jump-started Lord Ram's pastime, so to speak. And he is the one who gave Lord Ram and Lakshman the opportunity to go to the forest, to conquer the demons, and then present them before King Janak. And then the marriage between Lord Ram and Sita takes place. Now, if you know a little bit about Vishwamitra before that, you will know that Vishwamitra actually originally started as a king. But when he realized that Vashishta was such a powerful sage and that he had mastery of control of the senses and the mind, he decided to take up the path of Dhyana Yoga and meditation. And after years and years and years of great meditation, the Devatas became worried that someone who meditates so much will become very powerful. So what did they do? They actually sent a very powerful and beautiful Apsara as a source of distraction. And she's famously known as Menaka. Anyone here by name Menaka? I sometimes get a bit scared. The other name I always ask is the name Maya. Because the word Maya in Sanskrit means that which is not. Maya also means illusion. And sometimes when I tell people whose name is Maya what their name actually means in Sanskrit, they're not too impressed. And they're not too happy. So anyway, Menaka was this very powerful Apsara who appeared before Vishwamitra. And even though Vishwamitra was doing exactly as what Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, concentrating on the form, concentrating very hard, concentrating on his breathing, regulating his breathing mechanically, the moment he heard the anklets, the moment he smelled the fragrance of the flowers, his senses told his mind, let's take leave from all our regulation. Let's take a short break. And he kept his eyes very closed and he said, I will not open my eyes. But the mind said, what will happen? You are so powerful. You have been sitting here. Are you telling me that just by opening your eyes a little bit, half closed, that you cannot control your senses? Surely, Vishwamitra, you are greater than that. And with that last bit of argument, Vishwamitra opens his eyes and he never shuts them again. This is the power of the mind. And this is the challenge of this yoga. In today's age, it may be trendy for many people to go to yoga studios, to concentrate for a while on peace and silence. But the truth is, we live in a world of noise and disturbance. How are you going to be peaceful when you're sitting in a lecture? How are we going to be peaceful when life doesn't treat us the way we want it to treat us? How are we going to be peaceful when we have a misunderstanding with our loved ones? That is the time when yoga must be applied. And we cannot tell our wife when we have a misunderstanding with her, stop, I need my kusha grass, I'm going to sit down and I need to meditate. She will go into the kitchen and come out with an implement and hit you very hard on the head. That is not the way of yoga. And this is why Vishwamitra had difficulty. The other personality is as interesting as Vishwamitra. His name is Shaubari Muni. If you read the 9th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, his episode is given. Shaubari Muni decided that he wanted to concentrate on the form of the Lord in seclusion. He went to the forest and it was not quiet enough. And he decided that I will go into the depths of the ocean. Yogis are very powerful. They develop great siddhis. They're able to last, to breathe, to become smaller than the smallest, bigger than the biggest. These things are spoken about in our scriptures. Today they appear as miracles, but to those who have followed this path, they can appear commonplace. So Shaubari Muni, the Puranas tell us, went into the depths of the ocean to meditate. And there he experienced great silence for many years. And he concentrated just the way Krishna has stated in the Gita. But one day, in the depth of the waters, Shaubari Muni just opened his eyes a bit and he glanced at the fishes that were swimming by. Because in the depths of the ocean, he will not see human beings, he will see fishes. And at that moment, he saw two fishes. He saw a male fish and a female fish. And they were in the act of reproduction, which is as normal as nature is. But when the yogi saw that act, something in his mind became agitated. And he thought to himself, I have a desire now to actually progenitate my race, to actually achieve union with a woman as my wife, and to continue in the path of material enjoyment. A moment's vision of not a man and a woman, but two fishes. Shaubari Muni comes out of the water. He goes to the king of the land, presents himself, and he says that I am a great sage, and you will be lucky if you hand over a daughter as my wife. Shaubari Muni then realized that the king was looking at him in horror, because thousands of years in water, in meditation, his appearance was not very presentable. But because he's very powerful as a yogi, he presented himself again, and this time he could change his appearance to look very handsome like a young man. And so the king was very happy to give him all his daughters in marriage. In today's world, sometimes I'm asked when I teach Hinduism, I was teaching Hinduism in a French school last week, and someone asked me, do the Hindus advocate polygamy or do they advocate monogamy? Because they say, I read about these kings who have, hundreds and hundreds of wives, so what's the deal? And I told them that generally speaking, if you read all our sastras, especially in this day and age, we believe strictly in the principle of one man and one wife. For maybe practical historical reasons, the kingly caste may have had reasons to actually take care of the women at that time because there were less men, but these would have been extraneous circumstances and they would never have been the norm. And of course I told them another reason that was very nicely given actually in the sastras, that one wife to one husband and one husband to one wife is about all that we can endure. And I think you will agree with me there. My wife is not here today, just for your information. Normally she sits here, but I'm just speaking about these matters. So in case you want to find out where my wife is, she's not here today. So Saubri Muni marries all these wives and he settles down to a life of material enjoyment. And after many years, when his wives die, when his strength for material enjoyment will wane, Saubri Muni becomes frustrated. And one day, Shastras tell us, he's sitting peacefully, quietly, and he thinks back on his life and he realizes that, you know what, all these years that I've spent in material enjoyment is ultimately temporary. And all this has happened because I tried very hard to concentrate, and a moment's distraction took me away. So Saubri Muni at that point of time changed the quality of his life. He looked inward, he contemplated more on the purpose of his life, and he achieved perfection because he understood that his senses had actually gone out of control. So the point is, it is challenging to have this dhyana yoga, especially in today's world, especially if you're in Singapore. Which now brings us to the second yoga, work as worship. Now, this yoga is probably the most practical. Why? Because Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, everyone is forced to act helplessly according to his natures and his qualities. Isn't it true? Have you noticed in your interactions with people how their natures are so overpowering? You try very hard to change people. Very often you find it's difficult. Forget people. It's so hard to change ourselves. The way we are is the way we are. And Krishna says that in the Bhagavad Gita. We all have natures. And very often we act helplessly. And Krishna says another very important thing. We are all active by nature. Look at all of you. Every 1-2 seconds you have to shift. Every 1-2 minutes, you just keep moving. You either adopt this posture, or you put on your hands, or you move your legs, or you breathe a bit differently, or you look at your watch and say he has about 20 minutes left. Things like that, right? We can't keep still for a moment. We can't. Look at our children. If children can keep still for a moment, parents become very worried. Isn't it true? It's true. When children become quiet, right? When I'm in the house and suddenly my 2 children become quiet, red flags go up. They are up to something or something has happened. But if they are making noise, right? Me and my wife, we are in a state of meditation. Because we are peaceful. We know everything is fine. Because it's the nature of the soul to be active. It's better to accept that. Sometimes in life our sastras say, the best way to become peaceful, and you think about it, bring this back with you. The best way to be peaceful in this world is to accept nature for what it is, instead of expecting things to be the way you want it. Expectations lead to disturbance of the mind. Acceptance with knowledge and maturity lead to peace of the mind. Think about it. In Karma Yoga, this is the idea. First, everyone is active. No one can be inactive. Now, what are the qualities of a person who is actually a Karma Yogi? This is very important because we are all working. That includes the housewives and the homemakers. You also have work. So how is it that devotees of the Lord can be workers? And how does that make them devotees? The first point we should understand is, there is nowhere in the Bhagavad Gita and in the principles of Vedic literature where Krishna tells Arjuna, you know what? Stop fighting and go to a cave. He doesn't tell him that. Because devotees by nature, we are workers. We are not shirkers. We do not run away from the job that is prescribed to us. That's why Krishna says in the Gita, perform your prescribed duties. If you're all NUS students, then at this moment that is your prescribed duty. If you get married, your prescribed duty is, amongst other things, that you are a husband or a wife. If you are working, then let that be your prescribed duty. Sometimes we say, but what about the idea of job satisfaction? I don't like my job. I like my job. Let's be realistic. Not every one of us in this room is going to get the job that we love doing day in, day out. That's a fact. Like everything else in life, you don't get everything that you want. But whatever you are doing, Krishna says, then you must do it in such a way that you do it without attachment. Look at the verse 5:10 of Bhagavad Gita. It's right up there. The secret of working Krishna gives is very interesting. And it's very difficult for people to understand this. Whenever I speak about this, people have difficulty understanding it. But I think you will catch it. Krishna says that the starting point is to work. Everyone works. But the devotee works with a different attitude. He works with the attitude that his work is a form of service. It is a form of service to whom? The Supreme Lord. For his satisfaction. Don't we all work for our employers? We do. And when we work, we try to please our employers because we know that's the way up. Krishna in Bhagavad Gita only tells us one thing different. The only thing we have to do is work for a higher employer. Our supreme employer is the Supreme Lord. Because he is the one who ultimately maintains us. Income we earn, but maintenance is in his side. If income could maintain all of us, right, we would live forever as long as we work. But you know and I know that people die every day. People live long, people sometimes don't live so long. Who maintains all this? So that's why Krishna says, you please work, Arjuna. At the battlefield, Arjuna told Krishna, I do not want to be a warrior. The job description of a warrior doesn't suit me now. I want to resign. What does Krishna tell him? No resignation for you today. Not at least for the whole war. Why? Because at this moment, your prescribed duty is that of a soldier. And you will have to fight because war is imminent, and in this case, it is necessary. So Krishna tells Arjuna that if you fight for my satisfaction, not because you like it or because you don't like it, then you're fighting, you're working, you're mothering, you're fathering, whatever activity you do, if you do it for the satisfaction of the Lord, you are free of the law of karma. There is no reaction to what you do. And that's why it's considered to be karma-free. I like the verse 5:10 in the Gita. The actual verse is, Brahmani adhaya karmani, sangam tyaktva karoti yaha. It's a very important verse. So, here Krishna says, Arjuna, you have to work. But you know how you must work? Brahmani adhaya. Adhaya in Sanskrit means resign. So Krishna is telling him, every day in the morning, you go to work and you start your work. In other words, you get employed. At the end of the day, when you finish your work, you resign from your work. Literally, you resign from your work and you leave all the results of what you have done at the lotus feet of me. When a devotee who is a karma yogi does that, then Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, you will not be affected by the results. And whatever sinful results there are, will also not touch you. Just like a lotus flower. Where does a lotus flower grow? Where does it grow? It grows in muddy waters. And even though it grows amidst not so pristine surroundings, it is always very clear. If you have water dropping on a lotus leaf, you find the water has a propensity to just flow. That's how we live in this world as a karma yogi. We work hard. Just like the person next to us, he works. But our attitude and our motivation is different. And that is why a worker in karma yoga becomes peaceful. But then you may ask how to work in that way. And Krishna gives you an amazing 4 verses which tell you the psychology of how to work. Think about it and contemplate about it. The first thing you must remember is, Arjuna has told Krishna, I want to fight. Now hear what Krishna says. Krishna says, Arjuna, in all your activities, do one thing. You depend upon me. And how do you depend upon me? Work under my protection. How do you work under my protection? Be conscious of me. So that's the first thing a karma yogi does. He's always conscious of who he's working for. That's one. Second, he says, if you are conscious about who you're working for, then what will happen? by my grace,